So I'm going to talk a little bit more about what Jung meant by the self, what it is, because it's very important in his work. So as I was saying in the previous slide, the self is the totality of our personality. That's what he called the totality of who we are, the self. And it's not only that which we are conscious of or our conscious personality, but it is the entirety of what is conscious and unconscious within us. Because most of who we are, of what we are, is actually unconscious. So the self sits at the seat of both. It encompasses everything. So unlike the ego, which is just our conscious awareness or identity and our self-image, that which we think we are, the self is actually our true identity, our true authenticity, who we really are. So the self is the center and conductor of our psyche. It is the central force driving our development. It is that aiming to guide our personalities to a wholeness. It unifies the opposites within us. It possesses all of our potentiality. So all that we can become and all that we are. So it's very similar to the soul, meaning that this undistorted wholeness within us that is our true identity and that we are trying to get back to or identify with. So it is both a guide and a goal at the same time. So it is a guide, meaning that it is the central force assisting us, helping us, giving us a direction, trying to support us in our development and evolution. And it is also a goal, meaning that we are trying to become the self in the flesh. We are trying to embody more of the self of our true identity in our conscious personality. So psychic development is a continual process of allowing more of the self to be integrated into the personality. So here's a quote by Jung that further elaborates on the self. He begins, I usually describe the superordinate personality as the self, thus making a sharp distinction between the ego, which, as is well known, extends only as far as the conscious mind, and the whole of the personality, which includes the unconscious as well as the conscious component. The ego is related to the self as part to whole. To that extent, the self is superordinate. Moreover, the self is felt empirically, not as subject but as object. So Jung describes the self as the superordinate personality, that which is at the core or the top of the hierarchy, that which has the most influence, which has the most power, the most say, and the ego is just a part of the wholeness of the self. So he also says that the self is felt not as subject but as object. So essentially what he means is that because we are identified with the ego during our conscious experience, and we have times where we come into contact with the self. And whenever we do, we experience it not as if it is us, but as if it is something other, an object. And oftentimes it is something that feels much bigger than the ego or dwarfs the ego, makes our ego feel small. It feels frightening at times. The self feels powerful, and it can come to us in all kinds of ways. One of the ways it may come to us is through dreams, dream images, characters in our dreams to deliver messages of some sorts. So here's another quote by Jung. Says the superordinate personality is the total man, i.e., man as he really is, not as he appears to himself. To this wholeness, the unconscious psyche also belongs, which has its requirements and needs, just as consciousness has. So here are some quotes by Lionel Corbett talking about Jung and the self. Corbett was a Jungian analyst and a psychiatrist, and he recently passed away. But when talking about Jung, he says, he believed that the self acts as a guiding spirit, a spiritus rector, or a central manager in the personality. That is, there is an invisible presence that arranges the different aspects of the personality as if in the form of a drama in which each part plays a role. And he continues, Jung believes that the self is the archetypal basis of the ego. meaning that the self provides a set of potential for the development of the personality. It follows that if the self is truly an imago Dei, an image of the divine, then the empirical personality is spiritually determined. One's life story is in a spiritual biography, and work on one's own psychology is a spiritual practice. The potential to develop complexes or psychopathology must also be given by the self as part of this telos or destiny, so there's a spiritual basis to our suffering. So what Corbett is explaining is that there is a method to the madness of our experience. So through Jung's framework, if the self is the one that is guiding our development, then there is nothing that we experience that is not meant to be a catalyst of some sort to further our development, so that even psychopathology or doing inner work on our psychology is in essence a spiritual practice.